Eating bugs and seaweed. Americans need to get over their fears. Although many people in the United States suffer from a lack of good food, we don't fear a famine because of our rich farmland and modern farming. But as the world population increases, we won't be able to maintain our current eating habits. We will have to find new sources of food. Scientists have identified two important sources of food for the future. One is insects. As seen in other parts of the world, eating insects is an efficient way to provide basic food needs. The second is seaweed, which is a cheap and easy way to get nutrients. But most Americans and Europeans won't touch either food. They think of these foods as dirty and dangerous. Americans look at seaweed on the beach and turn up their noses. If people knew the facts, they might change their minds. Eating insects isn't dangerous if they're prepared properly. Most commercially prepared insects are subject to the same food safety laws as other foods. In some parts of the world, people even eat large tarantula spiders. When prepared as food, tarantulas are no more dangerous than beef or chicken. The same is true for seaweed. Eating seaweed produced as food can be just as safe as eating a tomato from the supermarket. Fortunately, food fears have a way of changing over time. For example, until the late 1800s, Europeans thought tomatoes were toxic. People called them poison apples and refused to eat them or use them in foods. Today, lobster is one of the most expensive and desired foods in the world, but until the early 1900s, it was a cheap food fed only to prisoners in jail. Just 30 years ago, the idea of Americans wanting to eat raw fish was ridiculous. Today, there are nearly 4,000 sushi restaurants in the United States. Many items in these restaurants include raw fish and rice wrapped in seaweed. Americans need to get past their fears of eating insects and seaweed. For many reasons, they are the foods of the future. Number 1. Read the paragraph from the passage. Fortunately, food fears have a way of changing over time. For example, until the late 1800s, Europeans thought tomatoes were toxic. People called them poison apples and refused to eat them or use them in foods. What does the word toxic most nearly mean? A. Frightening. B. Poisonous. C. Delicious. D. Versatile. Number 2. Which sentences from the passage best support the conclusion that food trends can change? Select 2 answers. A. Americans look at seaweed on the beach and turn up their noses. B. Eating insects isn't dangerous if they are prepared properly. C. For example, until the late 1800s, Europeans thought tomatoes were toxic. D. Just 30 years ago, the idea of Americans wanting to eat raw fish was ridiculous. E. Many items in these restaurants include raw fish and rice wrapped in seaweed. 3. Part A. Which sentence best shows the main idea of the text? A. Americans don't like eating insects or seaweed. B. Insects and seaweed are eaten in many other countries. C. People used to be afraid of many foods that are popular today. D. Because of our growing population, Americans should consider eating insects and seaweed as an alternative food source. Part B. Which paragraph from the passage best supports your answer in Part A? A. Paragraph 1. B. Paragraph 3. C. Paragraph 4. D. Paragraph 5. Number 4. Tomatoes used to be known as A. Desired foods. B. Refused. C. Dangerous foods. D. Poison apples. Read this summary. As our population grows, people need to start eating new foods such as insects and seaweed because we won't be able to maintain our current eating habits. Although it might seem crazy now to try insects or seaweed, people used to think tomatoes were poisonous and sushi was ridiculous. so eating habits can definitely change. Which key detail is missing from the summary? A. Insects and seaweed are safe to eat. B. The author wants us to know that eating insects and seaweed are safe and is actually already normal in different parts of the world. C. Insects and seaweed are eaten in many different countries. D. Scientists have identified two important sources of food for the future: insects and seaweed.